Welcome to another episode of the Mapscaping podcast. My name is Daniel, and this is a podcast for the geospatial community. If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you've used open source software at some point. Maybe QGIS on your desktop, maybe QField out in the field. Millions of people have. But have you ever stopped to think about who actually pays for it? Who keeps the lights on? Pays the developers and makes sure the servers don't go down when an avalanche hits the data center? Yeah, that's a real thing that happened, and we'll get into it. My guest today is Marco Bernasocchi, the creator of QField and the CEO of OpenGIS.ch. Full disclosure, I actually work for Marco as the community manager of QField, but that's not why he's on the show today. He's here because he's figured out what a lot of open source projects struggle with: how to build something that's genuinely free and open while also paying a team of 14 people to keep it running and growing. We talk about the 3 ways open source projects make money, why free software might be the wrong name, and the mindset shift from selling services to selling convenience. If you have ever built something people love and wondered how to make it sustainable, this one's for you. Okay, let's get into it. Marco, welcome to the podcast. I talk to you on a regular basis because I work for you. I work for QField. I work for OpenGIS.ch. My role there is community manager, and I do marketing as well. But that's not why you're on the podcast. You're on the podcast today because you are the founder, creator. I think we jokingly called you the old man of QField just before. And that's really what I want to talk about is QField. I want you to give the audience a brief understanding of who you are, what QField is, and then I want to talk about who pays the bills. How do you keep QField running?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Marco, welcome.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, that's indeed not me mandating the meeting for once. But more you asking for, and I like it because it's a subject that is very dear to me. I've been talking to it at the last FOSS4G, and I talked to it at FOSDEM in a keynote. So it's something that I really like to get across to people and to get them to understand that open source is fantastic, but we all need to pay our employees. So I'm sure you wouldn't be happy if I sent you some source code as a salary.
No, that wouldn't be so great. So I appreciate that you put the time and effort into making this sustainable. Again, we'll get into that in just a second. Could you tell me a little bit about you and about QField?
Yes, absolutely. As I say, I invented it, created it, whatever. I basically, in 2013, took QGIS, back then still Quantum GIS, and made it run on Android, on a 3 inches Android device. And that was called QGIS for Android. And it was my Google Summer of Code and my last 3 university credits. Thought about it yesterday when I was invited to speak about digital public goods at the parliament in Switzerland. And I was like, that was some seriously well invested 3 last university credits. And in the evening, I was at the conference and I met one of my professors back then. I told him, like, you did a good job back then and letting me do this because it turned out pretty neat. But that was 2013. And since then, I then started a company together with Matthias, OpenGIS.ch, as you mentioned. We are meanwhile 40 people doing work on QGIS and QField. And I've been at the beginning pushing, driving development of QField myself. So let's say everything that was QGIS on Android was my work back then. Then I started with Matthias more when we renamed it to QField. Since then Matthias took over more and more, but then he became the CTO of the company. So not much time for developing anymore. And now we have a dedicated team of 14 people around QField to keep building that. Beside QField, I'm the chair of the QGIS Foundation, and I serve as a member of the board of OSGeo.
It's pretty safe to say you're heavily invested in open source.
Yeah, way too much currently, as you can see in my sleep. No, it's on top of it, and I'll do a small advertisement plug. I am organizing currently the QGIS User Conference for October here in Lux. So anybody listening, there are still tickets, not many, but still some there. And that one is taking a bit of toll on my sleep.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
More than the newborn you have in the house?
I'd say they all play together to keep me awake.
Okay, so I appreciate the introduction. Thank you for bearing with me there when I ask a few sort of slightly personal questions. You've got a team of 14 working on QField, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
How big is QField? How many users do you have? How many downloads? Can you give us some numbers so we understand what it is this team of 14 is doing?
Yes. So QField, and I'm going to give you mainly Android numbers because those are the ones that we have since longer, because at the beginning it was QGIS for Android, and kind of Android is the platform that is way first. So there we have currently about 1,700,000 downloads or something like that. Through Google Play Store, we see more or less 500,000 active users per month. And these are people that turn on QField at least once during the month. On the cloud, I think we have something like, I don't know, I'm going to 70,000 accounts there on that. Remember, the cloud is also has a free tier that everybody can just use. So yeah, this is kind of the rough numbers. On iOS, you probably need to add another 250,000 of downloads, maybe more. I haven't checked those numbers maybe since 2 months or so, but that's, yeah, we are roughly over 2 million downloads in total. And then we have Windows, Linux, whatever you want, Mac OS, that we don't actually know how many people are downloading because these are just plain downloads from GitHub, which we don't track or we can't track, or yeah.
There's a lot of people out there using QField. It's installed on a lot of devices, at least 500,000 monthly users, people turning on the app. These are the ones we can track, of course. Probably there's a lot more than that. And QField Cloud, so this is the cloud platform that lets you sync between QField when you're out in the field and back to your database.
Correct, yeah.
You have 70,000 users on that. Do you have any idea of how many of those would be free accounts?
I would say maybe 70%, something like that. So, yeah, probably something like that. And what we also need to start doing now is really telling the people, hey, if you're not using it, can we close your account? Can we clean up a little bit? I remember the first 2 years of QField Cloud, it was all for free. We stayed in beta for 2 years and we just gave the service for free to just stress test it and have a lot of people on it. It was clear from the beginning there would be a paid tier behind. It's not that we locked in people by saying it's going to be free forever. We just said, look, it's going to be free as long as we're going to be in beta. We give no guarantees while we are in beta. But if I remember right, we had one single outage and it was the very day that we went out of beta. So, it was funny. It was super funny. We had 2 years of like super good. And then we were like, I think we're good. Then the very day we were going out of beta, we had a small outage and a bit of stress. I think that was good to kind of get ourselves into the mode of not being in beta anymore, but being in a place where you're responsible for people's work. And that's one of the work that those 14 people are doing. They manage the cloud platform and they make sure that it runs even when, and I'm not going to joke here, even when an avalanche hits your data center and you get a message from the data center saying like, hey, yeah, we are out of power because we've been hit by a huge avalanche and the diesel backups are under the snow. And that was in beta still. Eventually we changed to another data center which has redundant location. But it was fun to see the level of things you need to think about when you're running a software as a service. You know, it's really the consideration we never had when we were doing only QField as an application, because QField is still meant to work offline first. And that's, I think, something fantastic. The cloud component just enhances it. It makes your life simpler. It's a commodity and gives you just the possibility to just push a button and have a better workflow where you don't need to connect a cable or export data from your phone and so on. But you can still do all of that without the cloud. So that's something that we want to keep as a baseline, is that QField should work without any server component, because it just makes life easier for people and it allows them to do whatever they need to do in any kind of situation that they are in.
This sounds like a uniquely Swiss problem, having your data center being hit by an avalanche.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you choose data centers by some specific criteria that we had in mind back then, which we still have. Back then, it was to us, it was like sustainability was the highest criteria for the data center. So this data center that we choose, that I'm still extremely fan of, is a reused textile factory. So in the early 1900 in Switzerland, there was a big textile industry. Obviously, it takes up a lot of place, but it's not used anymore nowadays since there is no textile production in Switzerland anymore. And so they are reusing this with reused hardware, completely hydropower. The whole sustainability thing is extremely strong behind this data center that we use. And it's called Data Center Light. So I'm going to do even I'm not affiliated with them or anything. It's just I think they do a great job. The only thing that turned out to be a problem for us is that we are running a global software as a service thing that we just needed redundancy. So we went to another provider that has very high sustainability standards as well. They also have data centers that's completely renewable energy. But we couldn't stay with Data Center Light because it was just stud too small for what we are doing. That's why we had to be away. And they sit in the middle of the mountains, just literally across the mountains here on my town. And so it was something local, something small. I really liked the idea, but it was just slightly too small for what we need in such a relevant use case.
So what I really want people, listeners, to get out of this is QField is not just some random project on GitHub. It's got a staff, I guess a team of 14 behind it. You're serving millions of people, and not just in terms of the offline work they're doing with QField, the app, but you're running a software as a service as people's critical infrastructure via QField Cloud. And there's also a great many people using QField Cloud as a free service. So you talked about sustainability before. So the question is, who pays the bills?
Yeah, a very different type of sustainability here. And no, it is not a random kind of software. If you look at our success stories, you'll see the whole country of Finland managing their complete data production system with QGIS on the desktop and with QField on the field. So they are doing all their cadastre with QField. We are seeing in New Zealand NGOs managing 20,000 devices on the field to eradicate predators. So we have huge use cases around the world, and we sometimes don't even know about, and we just discover it in the news. Like I think it was you a couple of weeks ago discovered that in Norway, the Norwegian Research Institute is doing like super cool bio work with QField, and we're like, oh, well, good, no idea that was happening. So, and all these things help us a lot in communicating that is a serious software. The amount of users that we have helps us a lot, but doesn't necessarily pay the bills. So it helps paying the bills because by making sure that we are a serious software, it's kind of easier for other people to adopt. And what we eventually end up doing, or can doing at times, is have those users pay for feature development. So the Finnish administration needed Kogo functionality in QField. They sponsored the development. So the New Zealand project needed, I don't remember what it was, they sponsored it. So this is one way how we can finance QField. And it is the way how we finance QField early on. So feature development is very often the very first way that you manage to get money into a project or a bigger amount of money into a project. The other way you get money in is by donation, charity, sustaining memberships, sponsoring, all those kind of benevolent people giving you money for reason. This is also an extremely nice way to get money in. But both of them are a little bit uncomfortable, I think. Now that I see how the third one works, I can easily say that feature development model and the donations model are the one that give you most stress when you are trying to run a business or when you're trying to run an sustainable or economically sustainable open source project, because on the donation side, you just need to wait for somebody to donate, or you need to go and tell people like, hey, donate now. It would be great if you can donate. What about sponsoring? What do you want to become a member? And this is what we're doing with QGIS. QGIS runs mainly on sustaining memberships. So you can become member of the QGIS Association and pay for it. And the one benefit you're getting is visibility on the website. You don't get anything more. You're not getting voting rights or anything. You're just giving money and showing your logo on the website. And obviously the big benefit of QGIS existing still. But it's still something that you kind of need to go and ask. On the feature development side, it's really cool because you're pushing the project forward, and that I like a lot, because that's, I think, one of the unique points of open source is that instead of reselling 3 times the same thing, we sell it to 3 different people for maybe 1/3 of the price. So we try to get people to bundle effort together so that we can build more in the software and make the software go further, faster. Not forcibly the gains, like the how do you say, the revenue, because of course if you sell 3 times the same thing, you make more revenue, but the project will be at the same place. So I think a big goal usually in open source, or at least for me, has always been to try to push the project as forward as fast as possible, which is extremely well visible in QField and QGIS because the pace of development is just amazing. I just saw yesterday at the Geo Summit in Switzerland, I met Pirmin, my back then tutor or mentor in the Google Summer of Code when I started QGIS for Android. That was 2011 when we did that, and he showed me some pictures of the very first time I showed up at a QGIS meeting in 2011. And we were talking about QGIS 1.7, and the feature set was super limited. And it's 10 years, and it's just another software nowadays. QGIS has grown so much. Adoption is immense. So to get back to the sustainability, here you have these 2 ways. So donations and feature development. By feature development, the difficulty is always that you need to find features that make sense, that are needed, and that people are willing to pay. Or people approach you asking you to develop something, and you need to make sure that it makes sense to land into QField or to land into QGIS. Because sometimes people ask some extremely specific things that just do not make sense in QField. We can see multiple times people asking for something very specific to their workflow, and we have to tell them that doesn't make sense in QField. And that is why the plugin framework in QField has been so successful, because since when we opened up a plugin framework for QField, people have been able to building their own plugins or to ask us to build plugins for them that were extremely focused on what they needed to do. And they didn't have to manage rolling out an application, because before what we had to do was custom applications for them, basically taking QField, making a custom deployment of it, and then keeping it up to date. And that's hard work because QField moves very fast. We do a release every 3 months that you need to carry on with the client deployments as well. So now with the plugins, everybody can just use the normal QField, and on top of it, they add their own plugins without needing to care about updating QField, because QField has its own lifecycle, and we make sure that the API of the plugins framework is compatible. So I think that was a great point for feature development.
Yeah, but like it is, obviously, it's a great thing for feature development. It's a great thing for flexibility. It kind of gets you off the hook too. It means, I guess, that when someone comes and say, I want this very, very specific thing, you say, go over there, and you don't have to, and the QField environment grows without you having to introduce things that won't necessarily gel with the core of what you're doing. So I totally get that. So if I had to recap here in terms of making money for an open source project, I think QField is probably pretty typical of a lot of open source projects where you have this sponsorship. So I can show up and I could sponsor a feature, which is great, but I'm thinking about you as a business. It's kind of tough, isn't it, right? it's feast or famine. It's up and down. Like there's no, back to the idea of sustainability. That's tricky. And also there's work involved. If you need to get 2 or 3 people or companies together to get the sponsorship happening, that all of a sudden you're a project manager as well, not just for one, but for 3 different organizations. So that is tricky. You've got donations. Great. So people, again, in the same way they donate to QGIS. And then, of course, you're offering services. So you're building things. Someone shows up and says, hey, I want this. Great. And you build services around it. Why not just stick with that? Like, is that enough to create a sustainable project? Other projects run like this. Why did you do something else?
Yes. So, no, it's not enough, I think, because as you said, it comes with a lot of work. The donations to me are just like thank yous. So you get a donation, and it's thanks. It's super cool. Sometimes they put a text to a donation, and it's just like thanking you for no reason beside having given them a tool that they appreciate. And I love that. I never touch on not doing that because it's just cool, and we never budget for them. And sometimes out of donations, we just make something cool that we wanted to do, but it was not financially viable to do, and we just do it on donations. Feature development and services, it's tough because you need to do the work, you need to write the offers, you need to write the specifications. And first and foremost, you need to have somebody that is interested in that specific feature. Either you find them or they find you asking for that thing to be built. And I mean, we brought QField to where it is until 2 years ago, mainly on that. Until 2 years ago, 90% of the income of QField was feature development. We have now probably shifted to 20% being feature development, and the rest being the third point that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is the SaaS, the software as a service. The fact that we have a cloud with a paid account is the easiest way for a user to support a project. You're getting more commodity because we don't monetize on freedoms. Like you have your app, you can do everything you want on the app. You can even run your own cloud service because it's also an open source component. But if you just want it to be smooth and you just want to have an easier life, you can spend those 15 euros per month and you have a button to just synchronize your data and they come back to your office, to PostGIS database or to your geopackage in QGIS, and you're supporting the project in the best way you could. It's, to me, an absolute win-win situation because we know how many users we have. We know how much every month is going to come in. And that's what allows me to hire staff to run the service, to make QField better, to have more developers that develop QField, to have developers that improve the QGIS plugin, or we built a plugin to translate XLS forms into QGIS projects. And we didn't do it in QField Cloud only for the user. We did this as a plugin for QGIS that everybody can use independently if they are using QField or not, because that's where we see most value. So you see, we could have locked that part of the code within QField Cloud only for our users, and you have to upload your project to QField Cloud, and then it gets converted, and then you get it. But that's not where most value lies for the user. Most value is if you do it directly in QGIS, and you give them at the end the opportunity to publish it to QField Cloud, because that's always what we try to do, is to put things where they generate most value for people. Because we know that, or at least I know and I believe that the hard work that everybody is doing in open source to make those projects successful, and there's a lot of volunteers hours in the PSC of QGIS, in working, fixing bugs, in features, in pull request reviews, in all those kind of maintenance work that has been doing in the background, that we need to be good citizens. And QField, as an upstream project of QGIS, needs to put things as much as possible in QGIS. And that's, I think, a very strong position that we have that makes us a bit stand out as very good. And like, we want to be the best citizen possible in the QGIS ecosystem, and we want to give back as much as we can, be it with code, be it with functionality, be it with time that we put in there. But that in the end makes that we decide putting things at the right place. And sometimes the right place is not right in QField. It is in QGIS. And through all these kind of steps, we have managed to make clear to people that it is good to use the cloud system as well, because is the easiest way to support the project. And with that stream of income that is fixed or fixedly growing, we know how much we have. We can pay staff. We can do more. I think you said once in a call we can do more better. It's what we try to do. We try to be good. And thanks to the SaaS service, we can budget. And that makes life much, much easier, because I know I have 14 people that are paid, and that's okay. And I can start thinking about the 15th and the 16th. And they can tell me, hey, we are hitting a bit the limit on DevOps. We might have to start building up more on the DevOps. And I go like, yeah, we just need 10 more users, and then we can afford a DevOps. It's a very different mindset to, I need to go and hunt for projects so that I can pay people. It's very stressful when you have employees. If you don't have a reserve and you don't know when is the next big project coming in and how are you going to pay them. So that's the big advantage, at least from a business point of view, to have a continuous stream of revenue. And I think this can be compared a bit to QGIS as well, where we changed from one-time sponsoring into a sustaining membership program, where we basically, you're not sponsor for 2026 of QGIS. You become sustaining member, and next year you just get an email saying, hey, your membership is renewing. If you don't want to, say no. It's not like, please renew and you have to redo everything to responsor us. So it's just, we want to make it easy for people to give the project financial support because it's needed. And if you are using the project, if you are using QField or QGIS and you're not donating, but you could be donating. I'm not saying that everybody has to or should, but if you are in the financial position of doing it, you should absolutely doing it, especially if you're a business and you're building your business on those tooling. Because, I mean, the worst that could happen to your business, if you build your business on that, is that those tools would not be around anymore because your business would have to reorient or would disappear. So, and that is the main point that I want people to understand, is that, and that is why I always talk about open source and not about free software, because I really don't like the name free software, because it implies, I know it's about freedom. Obviously, I know what it means, but most people see free as for free. And that's the big mistake, is we need to pay people that are working on it if we want a product to be excellent and if we want a product to be sustainable. If we don't want our people to burn out, we want our people to be happy as well. I don't want developers that are burning out because they are brilliant, and if they burn out, they just leave. And that's absolutely not what projects want. And if we can kind of balance their life with their open source development being their job, then they don't burn out, because they are not doing a paid job, an open source job, and then their own life. So I really want good developers to be able to do just one job, and that being open source development, paid. If that's possible, that's what I'd like.
You know what? Like when I talk to people, colleagues in the company, in the QField team, in the rest of OpenGIS, there's this real sense, like they're open source all the way through. I guess that's the only way I can say it. There's that open source ethos that just seems to cut through everything. And from time to time, I get a little bit frustrated because I'm like, where's the business bit of this? You know, someone's got to pay for this thing here. And this is a real mindset shift. You talked about, you don't talk about open source, free software, sorry. You talk about open source software. That's a mindset shift. And like asking people to pay, building a SaaS when you're used to selling services is also a mindset shift, at least in my way of thinking. Was that difficult for you to sort of move away from what most open source projects do in terms of fundraising?
No, it was not hard for me, because I've always been very critical of not the content of the free software word, but the naming. I really like what the Free Software Foundation has done as a content to it. I really like how GPL works. And in some cases, I really, these things are really good. But the naming was terrible because putting free there just implies, for most people, it's not called freedom software, it's called free software. And that's what I've always been skeptical of. And that is why I actually never use the name. So I've always been using the open source because I see also open source as very much a technological advantage. So not only the social advantage of it. Thus, for me, it was easy to go and just don't use the word free. And I've been doing work in QGIS or using open source tooling since 2007. So it's been a while that I've been there. And the reason why I originally started was because I was frustrated with Windows or with the way you install things on Windows. You have to go and search for them and then you install them and you don't have a central. So a package manager was the key for me to move to, I think, Ubuntu 7 back then. Anyway, geeking out. But since then, I've built a business over now 14 years, and I've seen how the shift has gone from back then. The for free point was very important because the tooling were not on point yet. So QGIS 1.7 was never any close to ArcGIS. Now I take QGIS 3.44 or 4.0. The gap is way, way, way closer. I would even argue that in some areas, QGIS outshines, they're like areas are better for ArcGIS, some other areas are better in QGIS. So now it's really the tooling is there. So for me, the for free part of argumentation has fallen like at place 7 or 8. I don't know. It eventually you can bring it more in the sense of, and you don't have to care on how many computers you are installing it. You just put it in everybody's machine that wants it, just because you don't care if it's 100 or 200 people. It's not going to change your costs in that part. But an argument that to me is much more important and comes with open source and with free software, obviously, is the extremely valuable side effect that developing something in the open has. The whole technological advantage, yes, but then you get the possibility to have people just using your software, people that could not afford an alternative, can still use your software, can still use the top of the market software because it's there. And that's why I mentioned before, it's not that I'm asking everybody to pay for what they use. I'm asking the ones that could easily pay to pay for what they're doing, the ones that have a business built on top to support the tooling that they're using in their business. So it's really frustrating at times when you see, I don't know, Google marketing videos on how they place the transatlantic cable, like, fiber cable, the big one that goes from Europe to US. And in the video itself, you see a person using QGIS in the marketing video. And you are not getting any sponsoring for a company that, they could probably spend 50,000, like not even going through procurement. No, probably not. But that kind of thing is what gets me a bit like, or big governments using open source and not understanding that it is, yes, nobody's putting a price tag on it, but it would be good to support them in a way or another. So these points are really difficult to get through. And I think that the naming free doesn't help there. Yeah.
So whose fault is that? Like obviously the naming free, like when, we talk about Phosphogy as well, free and open source software. So let's look away for the free bit. It's not helping. In my interactions with the open source community, I don't think they're helping either. Like, I don't think there's a very strong push. And some people are going to, I hate that guy. I hate what he just said. But I think we're doing ourselves a disservice in a lot of ways by not pushing more, like you're saying. We're not asking everyone to pay, but what you're doing is worth something. This software is worth something. And maybe we just need to be a little bit more aggressive in asking people to pay for things. You feel free to push back on that, but that's my thoughts.
Well, no, I'm not going to push back on that because it's what I say all the time. I wouldn't say whose fault. I think the beauty of the open source ecosystem, or at least what I experience in QField and QGIS, is that people are extremely motivated and purpose driven. And this is something extremely unique. And I built a company to make open source because I thrive in that kind of environment where people are purpose driven, where you get a community post saying, hey, thank you very much. Since I discovered QField, I can teach my students in a classroom because I don't have laptops for them, but they have phones. I thrive on that. I really like the social component of open source. I just think that we need to be smart, and to allow that social component, we need to be a bit of Robin Hoods. That's a little bit how we are, with not stealing, but taking from the ones that can and publishing things for everybody to use so that everybody can use the tooling. And as I said, it's not somebody is at fault, is that sometimes, and you mentioned it before, when you speak in the company, people are extremely purpose driven and extremely, like, they see the greatness that we can do. And my job is to make sure that we can finance their drive to do greatness for everybody. So I think this is a job that I have as a CEO of OpenGIS.ch, but it's also something that I'm doing a lot as chair of the QGIS Foundation. So there, together with Tim and the other people in the PSC, we've done a huge work on how we are communicating around the project. So, the new website, a new branding with vision and missions and the old language, so that we can at all speak to decision makers. And when I talk about decision makers, I mean about financial decision makers, and not who's gonna do what with the GIS now, but that we really have this kind of language where we can go and be the Robin Hoods, taking from people that could give and make them understand why it is important to give. And I don't blame at all the Free Software Foundation for calling free software. Free software is not their fault that this happened. It just makes it a bit harder because the name implies, it implies freedom, yes, but it also implies for free. And when you have to explain a word, it's always a bit more complicated than if the word is self-explaining. But I think here is just our job, like the PSCs and companies themselves that really need to talk to their clients and talk to potential founder and givers and explain how and why. And sometimes people aren't even aware that QGIS runs on $500,000 budget per year. That might be, wow, $500,000 budget. We have 30 million openings per month on that software. It's a huge, it's a miracle of a software that is out there, and all the PSC work is volunteer. A lot of development is volunteer. We are trying to increasingly give people that are stretched very thin the possibility to drop a little bit of work and work for QGIS, and that's paying off, because the level of it's become an extremely professional software. There's no joking around there. So it's an important thing to give to those projects if you can.
We're really aligned on this. I know what you're saying. I know the analogy of the Robin Hood taking from the rich, but people pay for stuff that's worth something all the time. I don't know how many pieces of SaaS that I subscribe to, and I realize it's slightly different with open source. I get that, and especially what QField is doing, but QField.cloud is, that's more of the SaaS. I pay for stuff all the time. It's worth something. And the things I pay for, they're not going on and helping the community. There's not 30 million free downloads in the background. There's not all these projects that I get to hear about on a regular basis where people are saving the rainforest. They're making their communities more sustainable. And a lot of it is done on the back of open source software. I think, and this is just me, I'm not putting words in your mouth, we need to push that message harder, that it's not just open source, it's also great software. It's not just free software, it's great software. But that's just me. End of rant here.
It's not a rant, actually. It's it's a key point is that the one thing that we in the open source community are at fault is to be scared of telling people to pay for things. I really love what Evan Ruo, the main developer of GDAL, has in his email footer. It says, "My bits might be for free, but my time is not." And I think that's a key message that we have. There is nothing wrong in getting money for something that is doing so much great for free for other people. You're basically just shifting whatever you can pay for, which you would be paying anyway because you need the tooling somewhere else. But you can funnel it into something that allows other people to do all these great things that you are getting to talk about all the time. And honestly, Daniel, there is a reason why we hired you. And that's because we need to put that message out much more. And we have this luxury of being a company behind QField. So people say, single vendor open source is not open source. But we believe in if you're good, then single vendor is also good. QField is out there, and we've been super transparent to it. It's GPL, so you can do whatever you want with it. But we have the advantage of being one company behind it, which makes it easy to have somebody, for example, around to talk about things. We can have those 14 people are not only developers. We have a project manager, we have a team lead, we have a community manager, we have a graphic designer. So we can kind of build up those things that other big GIS companies have, obviously in a much smaller kind of setting, but we can start doing those kind of things where we are telling people, look, yes, you're paying for it. You could just run it yourself on your own servers if you really want the trouble, but you're doing something good beside it. You're sustaining the project, the very project that you're using. And to me, the key point of the keynote that they gave at FOSDEM was that we monetize convenience. We don't monetize freedoms. So we are really just selling convenience. Like everything, you could do it yourself. You could just run it on your own servers. You can run the application without the cloud, and it will be fine. It works. Millions of people are probably doing that, and we don't know. And that's okay, because that's what I like about open source is you do whatever you want with it. But we also give you a convenient way, or a extra convenient way, where for 17 euros per month, you're sustaining the project, you get easier, you don't need to care about running a service. Because let's be honest, I have two to three people running a service. If you'll be running your own service, it'll be just running on hope that it runs. And that's a big difference. So monetizing on convenience is the key point to me, yeah.
Yeah, that leads nicely on to my next question. And we'll slowly but surely sort of round off the conversation here. Monetizing on convenience is a great call. Let's play a game. I have an open source project, and it has a decent community around it. People are using it. There's businesses, like I know that they're building on top of it, or that it's a cornerstone in their business. And I'm struggling. I'm burning out. It's too much work. I'm working another job. I'm trying to maintain this thing. I really believe in it. This is what I like doing. This is what I'm passionate about doing. I'm a little bit shy. I don't like asking people for money. I'm a software developer. I'd rather hide in a cave and develop my software. That's it. What do I need to do? Like, give me some advice. How do I make this sustainable? How do I get paid for my work?
Wow, could you have put a bit more hard constraints on to make it even harder? But I think it's unfortunately a very realistic situation, what you just mentioned. Because great projects are often made by brilliant software developers that have a problem, that want to solve something, or that they see a potential and they go and build it. And this is a very typical open source way of going to a project. It's like somebody starts it. I mean, QGIS, exactly this way. QField, exactly this way. I think the main point that made QGIS and QField very successful, and I'll take QGIS as an example so I don't brag about myself, is that Gary Sherman very early on realized that he needed to get people smarter than him on board. And so did I. If you get good people on board in a project and you become kind of the visionary, like leading the way, but having other people as well doing work is what eventually makes a project scalable. Because you by yourself, you can do that. And it has to be a clear decision for yourself. Like, I'm happy with the state I'm in and I want to keep it this way. That's an absolutely acceptable way to go forward. It will not scale because your time is limited unless you manage to drop completely your job and that becomes your job. But eventually it will not scale more than one person. But that's absolutely acceptable if that's what you want. But if you say, I'm struggling, I want to get some financials in, I need to kind of breathe again because this thing is killing me. I think getting other people on board is the very first important thing to do, because that will start signaling that, okay, it's not one person just doing something. There is a community around it. And that is the first step of trustworthiness for a project. If you want to go and ask for funding, they'll be like, yeah, but what if you just go skiing instead of working? It's, I've been there. And I like skiing. So I was like, well, I'm going skiing and then I work in the evening. Don't worry. But the point is that one single person does not give the same trust as a community. So you need to build up a community of smart people. And that's exactly what Gary did at the beginning. I mean, he got Tim and Marco Toblerin and all those super good developers that did the early on work of QGIS and kind of started making it wider. And then comes the moment where somebody needs to don't be shy anymore and realizing that if you don't want that thing to just be your hobby, or if that thing is killing your time and you don't feel well anymore, it's absolutely okay to ask for money. And that is the biggest problem open source developers have, is that they feel bad about asking for money or they don't know how to. And again, it has to be a decision. If you say you are okay with not asking with it and you don't want to, that's absolutely okay. But don't get unhealthy because of that. Don't let maintainer pressure become something that makes you unhealthy. The maintainer burnout has become a subject because it happens, because people feel this pressure because that's their baby. They have built up something that has grown so importantly that they cannot let it go because they feel the responsibility of the tool and they don't want to let down the tool. But then that's the moment where you need to kind of really take this hard decision and say, like, I cannot just do it on my free time. I need to somehow get money in. And that's a difficult step because it's a very different language. You go from software engineering into talking to people to give you money. And that's the hard step. I was, on my side, lucky enough to not be a good software engineer. I was never a software engineer. I come from geography background. Luckily for everybody, QField is basically completely rewritten since I touched it last time, so don't worry there. But I've always been more the kind of the entrepreneur, and it was a bit easier for me to talk to people about money. And I'm not shy in saying that we need money to pay bills. And since I have 40 people working for me now or with me, I really know that I need the money. And, there is this sense of responsibility of 40 people with, I think we counted once, we have 60 kids directly dependent from OpenGIS. So it's that puts perspective on, like, if you're shy on asking money, that's not good for those 60 kids. And it really gives you the perspective of there's nothing bad. We are used to paying for good things, and that's fully okay. And by doing everything in open source, by you paying something, you're even allowing other people that cannot pay to use top-notch software. And I think that's the realization that makes it easy for anybody to ask for money to the ones that can.
I agree. I needed to experience the pain of what we were just talking about there. I was in a different situation. I wasn't the developer working away on an open source code. I was building other projects, and they turned into jobs. And all of a sudden I realized, man, I've got these 2 or 3 projects. Well, now I can call them jobs, but I'm working. I'm doing a job. It feels like a job. A passion project turns into a job. You're like, oh, I've got to go and do this because blah, 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 blah. Feels like a job. The only thing about that wasn't job-like was I wasn't getting paid for it. And I had to experience that for quite a few different times. And then I realized when I start a new project now, I make a mental decision. Is this a hobby or is this a business? Because if it's a business for me, like I'm going to treat it like a business right from the word go. This podcast, for example, I'd done so many different projects before I started this podcast. It's like, if this podcast can't make money, if it can't be sustainable, then I don't need another hobby project. I've got enough to do. So I think the very first episode, I asked the person for $100 and they gave it to me. And that was my signal. So great. Well, if I can make $100 on this episode, like it didn't even cover the editing time of it. But I knew that person was going to reach a much bigger audience for that $100 than they were ever going to reach on Facebook or with their blog post or whatever else. So I didn't feel bad about it. But that I needed a signal. And I decided if I can't make any money, if I can't sell this thing for $100, then I'm out. I'm not doing it because I have enough to do. But I needed to suffer a lot before I got to that stage. And my guess is a lot of people out there know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, as I said before, it's totally okay to decide it's a hobby project, but just don't pressure yourself into feeling it's a job, but being it a hobby project. I mean, if it's a hobby project, it should spark pleasure. It should be like every time you open that up, it should be like, finally I get to this again. Super cool. But if it's like, I have to, then you just maybe to be fair with yourself and decide, is this still a hobby that I'm enjoying, or am I just feeling pressured because of what I build up and now I feel maintainer pressure? And that's a clear moment where you need to be honest to yourself and say, look, either I get money in here because I can then reduce my other job, or I need to, take a step back or slow down, or like, it's important, because if you feel pressured all the time, you're not going to do that for a long time. And in the end, that's going to be the death of the project. And that's really the worst case for somebody that built up something. So it's really important to get other people in, try to share. And I know it's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's really, really important to try to get people on.
I think probably here is a great time to round this off. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm really pleased that we're going to get this message out into the world. I would like to produce more podcast episodes like this, encouraging people to, if they decide that this is what they want to do for a job, hopefully stories like this will help them sort of, okay, great, I need to do these 7 things. Oh, it's okay to feel like this. Yeah, it's tricky. Marco felt like that too. And he did, X, Y, and Z, and it's a slow process, but it worked. So I'm really hoping to get more of these stories out there in the world. And thank you very much for your time, Marco. Thank you for sharing the story with us today. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. And maybe as a last point, have a look at the Phosphor-G 2023 Prizren opening keynote that I gave on how to planting a seed and making it grow to a big project. So it really goes into the perspective of a person going through the old steps from just the beginning of a project into making it big. Because as I said there, like if you plant a seed with enough patience and commitment, it will grow into a tree. And I think that's a very nice message for people out there having software projects growing. Yeah, thanks for inviting, and looking forward to hear what comes out of this.
Thanks again, Marco. Really appreciate it.